Please welcome back Wakaba Kendo Club.
Yeah, he looks like the best.
Give me a microphone.
I've been like
So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here with us this afternoon to watch Wakaba Kendo Club. Wakaba means young shoots or young leaves, and as you can see we have a lot of our children members here today. We started life about 20 years ago as a children's club, but we also have adults classes, and we're based in the Britannia Leisure Centre in Shoreditch. If you're interested, you can come and find us later. There are people hanging around with leaflets and details, and if you're not based near Shoreditch, we belong to the British Kendo Association, and if you Google British Kendo Association, there'll be a list of clubs around the country that you should be able to find one relatively close to you. So Kendo, as we say, begins and ends with reiki or etiquette. We always start with a short moment of contemplation followed by a bow to each other to say thank you for practicing with us. And as you can see, we've got children from about 4 years old up to 18, 19, but you can actually practice Kendo from 3 or 4 years old right up until basically you can't move, and the type of practice you do might change a little bit over the years, but essentially you're able to do something. And we'll start with what's a warm-up exercise called Saburi, just stretching and cutting an imaginary target. Most Kendo practices will go through all of the things that you'll see today, but we've condensed it down from an hour or 2 hour practice into 20 minutes. So we'll do samples of most of the exercises, but as you can imagine, in a real practice it would go on a bit longer and be more energetic and exciting, tiring. So you can see the children are wearing white check jackets, and some of the older ones are in blue. Most kendoku you'll see will be in the blue jackets, or kekogi. It doesn't mean anything, it's nothing to do with the grading or anything like that. It's really an aesthetic choice. A lot of mums and dads like to see the kids in the white, and as you get older, kendoku tend to be fairly conservative, and most of us wear blue so as not to stand out from the crowd too much. But there's no particular law or regulation. I guess you could wear pink polka dots, but most people wear blue. There is a grading structure, so although there isn't different coloured jackets or belts or anything like that, there is a grading structure in Kendo. We start with Q grades, which is 6 up to 1, and then what you would think of as the black belt grades, which is from number 1 to number 8. 8 is extremely difficult to get, and it's so difficult there isn't even a single 8th dan in the UK. We only have up to 7th dans here. So you can see that most of the practitioners here today are wearing armour. The helmet is called a men, and you'll hear, you might be able to make out when they're shouting that they're calling out the names of some of the targets. So the men is the helmet, then there's the do, which is the chest protector. The men is made from canvas, which is stuffed and then stitched very tightly so it becomes very stiff and resilient to being hit. Do, the chest protector, is made of bamboo slats and then lacquered. And the tare, which is just protecting the top of the legs, and the kote, which are the gloves. So we'll start out with some basic cutting. Here we're just cutting men, or the helmet. The aim is to hit it on the top of the helmet, or just to the off centre. And as you see, the protagonists are running past each time they hit. The idea here is, if you can imagine that with a real sword, what you've got in front of you is a 3-foot razor blade, you want to get out of the way. So standing in front of someone and waiting around close to your opponent is not a good idea. It's very likely that they will counter-attack. So the aim is to cut and move past and get out of the way. So the Shinai, or sword, is made from 4 slats of bamboo. It's got a leather handle and cap top and bottom, and in between the slats of bamboo there are little plugs to keep the bamboo separated. So while it looks quite stiff, actually if you see it on slow motion film or captured photograph, they often bend quite banana-like actually. It's amazing how flexible they are when they're hit hard, and that of course takes a lot of the energy out of the blow and makes it much less painful if you're hit. People ask, is it painful when the Shinai hits? If it hits the target, no, it's fine. You'll feel a popping sensation, you'll know you've been hit, but you don't feel any pain. But obviously there are parts, for example, under the arms or on the elbows where you can be hit by accident, and yes, then it does hurt quite a lot and you will get a bruise. So what we're cutting here is the kote. It's the forearm of the glove, not the fist. So these are targets that you would score a point on in a competition if you could hit one of these. This is door. This is one of those exercises where if they miss and hit you under the arms, you will feel it, so you might hear the odd shout if someone's missed the target, but generally people will hit the right place, hopefully. You can hear that the person doing the hitting is shouting, and they're shouting the name of the cut. And we do this for all cuts. The idea is to land the blow, your front right foot and the shout all at the same time, so that the sword and your shout, which is a physical expression of your inner spirit, and your body, as expressed by your front right foot, all hit at the same time. And this is called Ki Kentai Ichi. So for a point to be valid in a competition, you have to combine all of those things. You can't just whack the target and hope for the best. You have to show intention, you have to be ready again to cut after your cut. So it's not like Western fencing where if you're wired up with electrical sensors, you just have to hit. That's good enough. No, you have to do it the right way, right time, right intent in Kendo. So this exercise now is just showing a little bit more coordination, putting cuts together in a more fluid way, so it's kotime. So very often if you see anything about Japan on television, they'll introduce Kendo by saying Kendo, the ancient martial art. It's got a lot of history, but Kendo as you see it today really isn't that ancient. The form in which we practice and the equipment we use really came into its own at the end of the 19th century. Before that, fencing was taught in local schools attached to local castles or Koryu schools, and every local region had a different style. This exercise, Kurikeyashi. The aim is to flow backwards and forwards in your movement, to be able to cut fluidly going forwards and backwards. You do it a couple of times each exercise and then move on to a partner. This is used in gradings up to quite a senior level because it's actually a very good exercise to demonstrate a person's ability. But it's also used in every Kendo practice you ever go to as part of a warm-up, building up your stamina. Generally, it's one of the favourites. So I say about the ancient schools of Kendo, the Kenjutsu schools and Koryu schools, which taught you how to fence to go into war. And of course, many of you will know that Japan was closed off to the west for about 250 years, from 1600 to 1850 or so. And during that period, Kendo became something of a more leisurely activity really for gentlemen to practice and learn sword fighting, but it also became more intellectualized. So there was a lot of links with Zen Buddhism, learning how to be a calm place in a storm, how to be quiet while you're moving, how to get your mind in the right place. And so Buddhism, as Zen Buddhism in particular, had a big effect on Kendo. And during that time, because there were no wars, they had to work out how to make practicing with a sword meaningful. And that was one of the ways in which they did it. And one of the things we prize still today in Kendo is that it is a great martial art to teach self-discipline, to teach you how to control aggression and to anger, and that's one of the reasons why it's a popular school topic subject in Japan even today. So the armour was refined really down from samurai armour to a sort of simplified armour during the 17th and 18th centuries, and the Shinai was invented, the bamboo sword, at that time as well, so that people can safely practice. And then when Japan opened up in the 1850s, 1860s to the west, everything western suddenly became a craze, and martial arts declined really seriously because the western way of doing things was popular and fashionable, and also because many of the local government authorities and local castles that used to run fiefdoms in Japan and run the fencing schools, they were abolished and there was no one to teach it. So it only really survived as essentially as a circus act. Troops of martial artists would tour Japan demonstrating their skills, and there was a real serious danger that it might have been lost to us. Fortunately, at the start of the 20th century, the police and schools adopted Japan as part of their curriculum, so it's very popular still in the police and it's very popular with schools. And that time was when we finalised the rules, worked out exactly how we're going to practice and standardised the way we do everything all over Japan, so it could be a school curriculum topic. So you see here the children are fencing, and typically a competition match would be 3 to 5 minutes. You have to hit one of the 4 targets, the helmet, the men, the kote glove, the door, the chest piece, or the stiff little thing that's hanging down in front of the throat, which is a thrusting technique which is really only used by more experienced people, so you may not see that here. And that's called Tsuki. So Kendo was a curriculum subject for boys from about 1900 to 1945, and at the same time girls would learn a martial art called naginata, which is a long pole arm. But after the war, it was deemed to have been too militaristic and the Americans banned it, so we nearly lost it again. For 6 or 7 or 8 years after World War II, no martial arts were allowed to be practiced in Japan, and then after that, fortunately, the Soviet Airways have reintroduced it, and thankfully enough teachers and enough students survived and knew what they were doing to get it going again, and there's now about 9 million people practicing Japan, 1 million in the rest of the world. So if you want to come along and start practicing Kendo, what you'll find is that you will be welcome at any club with just a t-shirt, tracky bottoms to start. You don't need to buy anything at all. The club will probably have everything you need just to get you started. If after a few months you want to buy the jacket, which is a hegogi, and the pleated trousers, which looks like a skirt but is actually divided, then they're about £20–25. Shinai's about £20 to get you started. You won't be in armour for at least 6 months, so you don't need to worry about that to begin with. So what we're aiming to do is try and land a clean cut that's not tangled up in your opponent, and then get out of the way and be ready to cut again. Armour costs from about £250 or so when you finally do want to get a set, but most clubs again have a scheme to lend sets to people whilst they're still beginners. The prices can go up to as much as 7, 8, 9, 10,000 pounds if you want a handmade set from silk and deer leather and bought specially from Japan, but really they don't need to go to that. 250 quid gets you a perfectly workable set. See what they're trying to do, not necessarily just rushing at each other. There's some tension building up at the start. They're trying to psych each other out, trying to force their opponent to make a mistake. Most likely that would be by, for example, taking the Shinai out of the on guard position, Chudan no Kamai. Essentially there's no shield in Kendo, so your sword is your shield, and you're safest if you can keep the point stuck at your opponent's throat. They really can't come at you, so the aim is to do something that makes them move that out of the way, and then you've got an opening that you can attack, and if they try and defend that opening, the targets are set in such a way that for everything you try and defend, for example if you try and cover your head, you'll be opening up another target such as the door. So you say all of those cuts were effectively parried and didn't really get anywhere. Typically in a competition match you'll be going for 3 to 5 minutes. The aim is to score 2 points, and it can actually be surprisingly difficult with all the criteria about being ready to cut again, showing intention, making sure the cut is clean, making sure that you've got your key eye at the right time. It's surprisingly difficult to hit correctly 2 times in 5 minutes. So you see some people have more energy. Another thing to say is because although Kendo is a full contact martial art, because it's not something that depends on physical strength in the same way as an art that depends on punching or throwing opponents, people of different ages, different sizes, different genders can all practice very successfully together. So it's quite common to see some of the children practicing their fencing with some of the adults. Certainly men and women practice on equal terms, and it's a great way to practice whether you're old or young. Everyone can do something. You tend to see younger people running around being very energetic, older practitioners perhaps a bit more wily, moving a bit less, but with better judgment of distance and timing. So that was pretty good. If they stand like that for too long, they'll get broken up and split apart just like boxers when they're hugging each other, so maybe get on with the fight. But if they move apart too quickly, the opponent might take the opportunity to hit, so there's a moment of tension there. So as well as the bamboo swords, we also use a wooden sword, which is curved and a little bit more like you'd expect from a proper samurai sword, and that's used for our kata, which done in pairs, and kata is like forms that are choreographed, and they're used in our grading system, and also just to help us keep in mind some real sword techniques, because a bamboo sword that's straight and long is not quite the same as a real Japanese sword, which will be shorter and curved. these are two of the practitioners who've actually been with us since they were very small children, 3 or 4 years old. As you'll see, they've come on quite a long way since then. And Conradus, the taller one, has actually been practicing with the British squad recently, so we're very proud of their achievements. Sonko squatting is essentially the same as a bow. If you've got a sword out in front of you, it's quite hard to bow formally, and so it's another piece of etiquette that we do at the beginning and the end of matches, punctuated throughout practice as a sign of respect for our opponents. We like to say that we're practicing with a partner and not trying to kill an enemy. It's not that your opponent is there to be smashed or what have you. They're there to help you improve, and your job is also to help them improve. Said at the beginning, we always start by lining up, armour stacked away neatly, with a moment of reflection, just to try and get your head either into or out of practice, and to clear your mind, and then a bow to our teachers to say thank you. This is Matsuri, which is the moment of reflection. So ladies and gentlemen, that's Kendo from Wakaba Kendo Club. Thank you very much for watching us.